What do people not realize is actually very costly? Long-term care and assisted living. Most people don't realize that senior living apartments are not less expensive than regular apartments, nor are they government subsidized. They also don't understand that care in senior living is not considered a medical expense, so it's not covered under Medicare or health insurance. Assisted living communities that provide help with dressing, bathing, transferring, toileting, ambulating, grooming, as well as meals, housekeeping, and transportation cost an average of $4,000 to $5,000 per month and is private pay. There is some limited assistance if the person qualifies for veterans benefits or Medicaid, but not in all states, and that's pretty much it. Most seniors will go broke paying for their long-term care in assisted living or nursing homes.
It's surprising how many people think senior living is affordable. My friend's mom had to move into one, and the costs hit hard. She thought she'd have some support, but Medicare didn't help much. Every month it was a struggle to keep up with the payments. It's a tough reality for a lot of families. Many end up draining their savings just to cover basic care.
Musical instruments. Since I'm a sax player, I'll just start there. Middle-of-the-road, intermediate models are about $1,000 to $2,000 on average. High-end professional models can be anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 and even more. Edit. My point here is that saxophones aren't even close to the most expensive instruments, and they can still cost 10x as much as my car, no exaggeration. Yeah, my car is only worth $1,400.
Yeah, I get it. Instruments can really drain your wallet, especially if you want quality. My buddy plays the trumpet, and he's got this vintage one that cost a small fortune. Makes my guitar look cheap, honestly. It's wild how passionate musicians get about their gear. A good instrument can make a huge difference, but man, the price tags can be shocking. Just shows it's a serious investment if you want to take it seriously.
Having bad eyesight. Glasses and contacts are not always cheap. Not everyone has insurance to cover it. Also, growing up, your eyes are changing, so you have to every year or so see the eye doctor to get them checked to find out if you need new glasses. When I play sports or do my photography, I have to wear contacts. It's expensive to deal with something you didn't ask for.
I get it. Bad eyesight can be a hassle. Glasses and contacts can put a dent in your wallet, especially when you need to keep getting new prescriptions. Playing sports or doing hobbies like photography just adds to the challenge. It's frustrating when it's something out of your control. It's just another expense that makes life a bit more complicated.
Cell phones. I feel like we're slowly inching towards sanity, but most people think an iPhone costs $99 and don't realize that an unlocked one would set them back at least $400. They're just paying for it in their plan, $20 at a time, and beyond if they don't upgrade their device at the end of their renewal period.
Yeah, it's wild how people view cell phones. A friend of mine thought she was getting a good deal on a new phone, only to find out she was stuck in a payment plan for 2 years. Just because they advertise that low monthly rate, people don't see the bigger picture. It's like a maze of contracts, and a lot just sign without really knowing what they're getting into.
Anything handmade. I have a number of friends that are either artists or handmade clothes. Anytime they go to sell something, people are appalled at the prices because it doesn't match factory-made mass-produced items. Yeah, it costs a lot because the person making it put in several hundred hours to make it. Even at minimum wage, it would cost $1,450 for a 200-hour project, but people would expect it to cost the same because Walmart makes a shit version that sells for $20.
It's true, people often don't get the time and effort put into handmade stuff. A friend of mine makes custom furniture. He spends days on a piece, but folks see prices and think it's too high, not realizing the craftsmanship involved. They compare it to cheap, mass-produced stuff and can't make the connection. It's frustrating to see art and skill undervalued like that. It's all about recognizing the worth, I guess.
Roads. Roads are not very cheap to build because they are actually pretty labor-intensive to build, especially if they aren't built using a paver. Asphalt roads can be especially tricky because price-wise they are very dependent on oil prices. That's why not many asphalt roads were built in the early 2010s. Of course, things are getting cheaper with new technologies like RSC, rapid setting concrete, a really cool new technology and stronger mixes, but that doesn't help maintenance costs very much. So the next time you're driving, think about how much effort has gone into the seemingly simple road you're driving on, in both the design phase and construction phase.
It's interesting to think about how much goes into roads. I once drove through a small town and noticed all the cracked pavement. A friend mentioned how the town hadn't budgeted for proper maintenance. Just a reminder that while we take roads for granted, a lot of planning and work goes into them, and sometimes they just don't get the love they need. Makes you appreciate a smooth ride a bit more.
Having pictures framed. This is a tough one. I'm an artist outside of my FT job, and in order to make a painting or drawing look a lot more finished, you really should frame it. However, doing so adds exponentially to the cost. Event well-made, simple frames can cost a lot, money, time in shipping, time in putting together and installing the work into. When you get into more complex framing, like a matted acid-free frame for a drawing, you're talking easily about another $200 to $250 just for a drawing or a print. People are just clueless about this, and the fact that you have to send it to a framer to have it done, and it takes days of waiting until it's done, and it has to be transported carefully to and from the framer. As you can see, this is a topic I've had to explain in depth to people a number of times before.
Framing art is tricky. I know a guy who's really into it. He always talks about how the cost can get out of hand. It's not just the frame, but the time and effort too. He had one piece framed, and it took weeks just to get it back. People think slapping a frame on is easy, but there's a lot that goes into it. It's a whole process a lot miss.
Tree work. People think it's easy to go up into a tree and cut a branch or remove an entire tree. But there's more to it than that, and it costs money. Skilled climbers who know what they're doing, chippers, trucks, ropes, chainsaws, etc. all cost a lot of money. It never ceases to amaze me when someone asks how much a 100-foot Doug fir would cost to remove, and they're flabbergasted to hear it's a couple $1,000s at least.
I've had a friend who did tree work for a while. He always mentioned how people underestimated the whole process. Climbing a 100-foot tree and taking it down isn't just about having a saw. There's planning, skill, and the right gear involved. He used to get a lot of sticker shock from clients when he quoted prices. It's wild how much goes into what's often seen as just some basic yard work.
Buying a house. It's not just a mortgage. It's the 20% down payment. It's the inspection fees, the attorney fees, the movers, taxes, potentially backdated assessment dues, and escrow fees. Each of these miscellaneous costs also have their own fees tacked on. I recently purchased a modest condo in a large city, and my closing and miscellaneous fees came out to nearly $10,000.
Buying a house is a lot more complicated than it seems. I remember when my friend went through it. They thought it was just the price of the house, but then came all these extra costs. It added up fast. I think they ended up spending a lot more than they planned for. Now they joke about how they had to get a second job just to cover all the fees.
Having a job. Since giving up work, I've been amazed at how little money it costs to actually live a basic but comfortable lifestyle. Going to work costs you in transport, fuel, parking, tickets, wear and tear, and time, clothing, food, lunches, snacks, coffee, self-education, childcare, taxes, tools, and equipment. Then there's all of the indirect costs. No time, so you pay someone to mow the lawn or repair the house. Too tired after work, so you eat out. Need a break from the daily grind, so you need an annual vacation. Treating yourself because you've earned it. Medical costs for work-related health issues. Not only that, but I was paying higher housing costs to live in an area with suitable employment, which also had a higher cost of living. I'd estimate that I was working 2 to 3 days just to cover the costs of working.
It's interesting how stepping back from a job can change your perspective on money. I remember a friend who quit his 9 to 5. He found that living simply, focusing on essentials, actually lowered his expenses. He realized the job wasn't just draining his time but his wallet too. He now spends less on food, commuting, and clothes, enjoying life more without the daily grind. It's a pretty eye-opening experience, really.
Going on vacation. As fun as it is, and as many great memories you make, it definitely puts a dent in your wallet. Not saying you shouldn't vacation or travel at all. Just saying you should plan it out before you go out of town and make sure you will still be able to pay your bills when you get back.
Yeah, I get that. Vacations are cool, but sometimes they hit the wallet hard. I remember a trip I took with friends. We had a blast, but when we got back, it was tight for a few weeks. Definitely learn to budget better for the next trip. It's all about balance, enjoying life while not stressing over money later. Planning ahead makes a big difference.
Saltwater fish tanks. What could cost initially around $500 to $1,000, depending on the size of the tank you start with, and whether you keep fish only or want a coral reef in your living room. You could end up spending upwards of $20,000 in the first year, including upkeep and maintenance. $20,000 figure is based on a 90-gallon reef tank.
I've got a friend who's really into saltwater fish tanks. He started small, thinking it would be a chill hobby. But soon enough, he was dropping thousands on equipment and coral. I remember him showing off the tank with all these colorful fish swimming around. It looked great, but man, he was always stressed about maintenance. It turned into a full-time job for him, not just a weekend hobby.
Old Goat here, 73. I live in a retirement community that has an assisted living center attached. It costs $12,000 per month per person. That's about $400 per day, but it comes with nurses on the premises for 24 hours per day and a lot of medical equipment on premises too. The big cost here is the cost of people. Does anyone really expect good nurses to work for minimum wage? I certainly hope not.
It's crazy how much care costs these days. I know a few folks in similar situations, and it's all about those extra hands. Good nurses deserve decent pay for sure. It's a tough balance, but when you need that kind of help, you realize what it's really worth. Can't imagine the stress that goes with it, both for families and those in need.
I wish I could upvote this twice. I take care of both my parents, and I'm barely keeping it together. My friends and coworkers seem to think I have a pile of gold in the basement to pay for all my parents' needs, and don't understand why I don't go out, why my wardrobe hasn't been updated in years. It gets tiresome trying to explain that the government isn't the one shelling out for them, and that it all falls on me.
That's a tough spot to be in. Juggling everything while people don't see the reality can wear you down. You end up feeling isolated, like no one gets the pressure you're under. It's hard to keep up appearances when you're just trying to make ends meet. Sometimes, it feels like you're the only one holding everything together, and that can be pretty lonely. Hope you find some moments for yourself too.
Yeah, I'd say my dog costs $1,500 to $2,000 a year overall. She has some minor health issues, so we see the vet more often than typical. Have her on a special diet to avoid her allergens, daily eye drops. Then there's toys, treats, gas her to the dog park a couple times a week, a dog sitter for vacations. Also the time she managed to eat a pound of uncooked rice. That was a $400 trip to the emergency vet to be told that it looks like she'll just poop it out. She's like $5 a day worth of dog, and that's before you factor in time spent walking her, playing with her, and making the agonizing decision of who has to put on pants and take her out for her before bed pee me, or my fiancé. She is literally the light of my life, and I would do it all over again. My partner and I spent a lot of serious thought about the responsibilities and costs of getting a dog, and yet it still gets intense day in and day out. I hope things get easier once we get out of apartment living and get a place with a yard.
Yeah, having a dog can get pricey. It's wild how the expenses stack up with vet visits and food. That emergency vet trip sounds rough. $400 just to wait for a poop is something else. But it's clear she brings a lot of joy to your life. The daily routines, like taking her out, can be a lot, but it seems worth it for the companionship. A yard will probably make things easier for you both.
I will add drums to that. I've never seen my girl so angry as when she saw how much I paid to upgrade my equipment to pro-level stuff. $5,000 for drums, $2,000 for cymbals, $1,000 plus for hardware. Add recording equipment at $3,000 for mics, $1,000 for an interface, and since I can build my own computers, it was only about $800, otherwise would have been double that.
I get it. Upgrading gear can be a point of tension. My friend once spent a ton on a new guitar without consulting his partner, and it didn't end well. They had a big argument over finances. Eventually, they found common ground, but it showed how important it is to communicate about these big purchases. Drums are cool, but sometimes it's about balance in relationships too.
Pianist here. Life as a musician is really depressing now that I'm out of my parents' house and out of school, which is where my other piano access was, and in a tiny apartment. You can usually find a working, albeit crappy, upright for $50 to $200 on Craigslist. But if you're a serious player, you really should have at least a baby grand, which even for a crappy piano quadruples your buying price or more. The worst quality piano I'd be willing to put up with in terms of a long-term instrument would easily set me back $15,000 to $20,000. And here all my friends are telling me to just buy a keyboard. It's not the same, guys.
I get it. Being a musician is tough, especially when you're starting out on your own. Finding space for a decent piano is a real challenge, and those prices are just crazy. It's like there's this pressure to settle for a keyboard, but it doesn't give you the same feel. You want something that resonates with you. It's frustrating when people just don't get what it means to play on a real instrument.
Seriously, look into getting your glasses made by an online service. I use Zenny Optical, but there are plenty of others, and they'll cost a small fraction of what mall or storefront opticians will charge. Just get your prescription from optometrist, then go online. Edit. I'm kind of astonished by the number and intensity of comments on this. It's clear that some people have had good experiences buying online, some others bad. I can only speak from my own experience, which is generally good. However, online glasses are cheap enough that many people can afford to give them a try. It's not like there's a lot at risk. Yes, I have no doubt that personal attention and bespoke fitting will give you a better result. The same could be said for clothes and for shoes. But how many people reading this are wearing tailor-made clothes or custom-made shoes? Yes, you need bespoke service if you have special eyes or special feet or body handicaps. But most people don't.
I got my glasses online too. It's pretty straightforward. Just sent in my prescription and chose a frame. The price was way better than what I found at stores. Got them in the mail, and they worked fine. Sure, it's not the same as the personal touch from a shop, but for most people, it does the job. Plus, if it doesn't work out, it's not a huge loss.
Even just having a checking account these days can cost money. Banks act like they're doing you a favor. Recently got a car loan that came with a free checking account. After the first few months, they changed the terms and added a fee of $12 a month for doing literally nothing. and I had to keep something ridiculous like $10,000 minimum to avoid the fee.
Yeah, I've had my share of bank frustrations too. Got a similar deal with a checking account that was supposedly free. Then they hit me with all these hidden fees. It's like they really know how to squeeze money out of you. I had to play this game of keeping a certain balance just to avoid getting charged. Feels like a trap sometimes, just to access your own money.
The problem is people's logic. When buying a used luxury car, you aren't purchasing a $25,000 car that will cost as much as any other $25,000 car to maintain. You're purchasing a 6 to 7 year old $70,000 car that will cost the same to maintain as any other $70,000 car. The parts and labor do not get cheaper as the vehicle gets older. People also fail to understand how complex and technologically advanced luxury vehicles are compared to other cars. That Toyota has a bulletproof, tried and tested V6 that they have been refining for 20 years. Your BMW, not so much. That twin-scroll turbo is cutting edge and has not yet stood the test of time.
This makes a lot of sense. I remember a friend who bought a used luxury car, thinking he snagged a good deal. A few months later, the maintenance bills hit him hard. He wasn't ready for the complexity of it all. He learned the hard way that the initial price doesn't reflect the total cost of ownership. Sometimes, sticking to something more reliable is the better choice in the long run.
In high school, I made a lamp that works using wireless power transfer to show to my physics teacher. A friend asked me how much I would sell it for, and I told him $50, which admittedly was a little high for the quality, but considering I had to buy a shit ton of components, couldn't get individuals, soldering equipment, lights, and a few other things, not to mention also learning how to solder and research/trial and error time. I think $50 was low. By the way, I make kick-ass lamps.
That's a cool story. It's interesting how much effort you put into that lamp, learning and experimenting along the way. It's tough to balance quality and cost, especially when you have to buy in bulk. I get why you'd value your time and materials. Sounds like your lamps have some serious craftsmanship behind them. Also, it's always nice to have a skill that stands out.
Yeah, completely this. This cuts both ways too. Far too many artists/artisans fail to even really analyze whether people will be willing to pay enough to support the artist's life. If the product you want to make is something that is readily available and cheap and good enough, then you have to be able to produce something truly special if you want to make it your living. Most people just never realize how much time it takes to make handcrafted things, time that could have been spent at a regular job. If a piece takes you 2 weeks working at full-time, or more realistically more than full-time, how can someone expect to pay less than minimum wage for that kind of thing? And if they're willing to pay minimum wage, but not more, why would an artist spend so much time honing that skill to make as much as they would at Burger King?
I totally get that struggle. A friend of mine tried to sell handmade jewelry, thinking people would pay for the uniqueness. But in reality, many went for cheaper mass-produced stuff. It was tough for him to see how much work went into each piece, and he started questioning if it was worth it. Honestly, it's a harsh reality that a lot of artists face, balancing passion and making a living.
This is a good one. I've had a few clients, I'm an illustrator/sculptor, request traditional mediums over digital and get appalled when my quote goes from $200 to $2,000. Then they practically shit themselves when they demand a work for higher contact and see the next price hike. Corporate clients are so much easier sometimes. Smiley face.
It's funny how people think traditional art is cheaper. When I switched to digital, it saved me time and costs. Then, when clients ask for hand-done work, they don't realize the effort involved. The price jump can really surprise them. I've seen some react pretty dramatically. Corporate clients usually get it though. They understand the value and are more straightforward about what they want. It just makes the whole process easier.
I mean, if faced with a $200 handmade belt buckle and a $10 belt buckle, and I need something to just keep my damn pants up, is it really so bad that I go for the $10 belt? The economy doesn't work around how much effort goes into the work, or day laborers will be the richest folk around. It goes to the utility of the unit. If you can provide me with the same functionality for cheaper, I'll go with that, because I'm poor as shit too and trying to survive.
I get what you mean. Sometimes you just need something practical that does the job without breaking the bank. I've had moments where I've passed on pricier options just because I couldn't justify it. Utility over luxury, right? It's all about making choices based on what you actually need, especially when funds are tight. Just gotta keep things simple and find what works for you.
In the US, it's absurdly expensive, and the eligibility requirements are extremely strict. You have to have a certain size house, make a certain wage, one parent has to be able to be a stay-at-home parent, and sometimes the adoption agent will have a prejudice against certain careers where they'll refuse to let you adopt.
It's interesting how complicated adoption can be. A friend of mine went through that process. They had to jump through so many hoops just to be considered. The requirements felt like a checklist that was impossible to meet. It made them question if it was really worth the effort. It's wild how an act of love can become this bureaucratic challenge.
Totally. I burn a lot of time on here while sitting on conference calls or supervising others. Probably about half my day. I know for a fact at least 2 of my coworkers do as well, especially when the workload is light. Combined, we probably spend 30-40 rSlash week not doing any actual work, and I know we're not the only ones.
Sounds pretty relatable. I think a lot of people find ways to fill the time during calls. Just sitting there for hours, it's easy to get distracted. I've done it myself. It's kind of a team thing, just keeping each other entertained while pretending to supervise. At least you're all in it together, right? Makes the workday feel a bit lighter, even if the work isn't getting done.
I deal with shipping a lot for the company I work for. They're an electrical engineering manufacturer, and I handle a lot of the third-party stuff we sell along with products. There are people who very desperately, absolutely must have a single 16-cent in-play cover for their thermocouplers. And they need it tomorrow, Saturday morning. The smallest UPS box is $47.85 to ship Saturday overnight. The part is 16 cents. They pay it. God knows why, but they pay it.
It's wild how some people will rush for the smallest things, right? Like a 16-cent piece, but they need it overnight. I guess some folks just can't wait. Even if shipping costs more than the item itself, they still go for it. It's kind of funny seeing that kind of urgency over such a tiny part. But hey, it's their money, and at the end of the day, you just get it done.
My friend grew up poor, and I've seen the type of stuff his family would have to deal with on a regular basis. Car problems make them miss work, then hours get cut, start falling behind on rent or utilities, so there goes internet or phone for a month. Finally, someone lands a better job, but all of their newly earned money goes toward paying off old debts. Then once they've nearly caught up, someone gets sick or injured, and the cycle repeats. Throw in a speeding ticket or a few late penalties, and you've got a very stressful situation.
That sounds really tough. It's wild how life can just keep throwing challenges at you. My friend felt stuck in that cycle for a long time, always trying to catch up but never really getting ahead. It makes you appreciate the small wins more, though. When he finally got a stable job, it was like a huge relief. But the stress of that past never really goes away. It sticks with you.
Oil changes are too expensive to do as often as you should, so you have to pay for expensive repairs from not getting the oil changed. Okay, doing it yourself is cheap, I get it. $60 shoes are too expensive, so you'll have to go to Payless and buy $20 shoes over and over again. Can't afford to buy bulk, You have to buy food every single week. Can't afford a doctor, so that weird issue gets to evolve into a serious disorder.
It's true. I had a friend who always chose the cheap option. He got those $20 shoes and they fell apart fast. He skipped regular checkups and later had to deal with bigger health issues. It's frustrating to watch someone avoid spending now only to pay a lot more later. Sometimes saving money feels good, but in the end, it just costs you more.
So true. I grew up poor and spent most of my 20s poor. Every single thing that went wrong was a huge deal. Flat tire, brakes going bad in my car, a surprise bill/expense. Things that a lot of people take for granted are major catastrophes when you have zero savings. My first girlfriend in college came from a very wealthy family. She had a car paid for her private college tuition, got $30,000 for her birthday present when she was 20, had her parents' credit card. She had no concept of my struggles and was so out of touch with how millions of people live, having grown up in a wealthy suburb. I've dated one other person who inherited a huge sum of money from an uncle. She entirely changed as a person and ended up breaking up with me eventually. The worst part about people who are born into wealthy families is their sense of having worked harder and being more deserving of everything than poor people, when usually the exact opposite is true.
I get it. Growing up with financial struggles can shape your perspective on life. You notice how differently people handle situations based on their experiences. My friend had a similar experience with a wealthy girlfriend. He felt she never understood his challenges, and it created a gap between them. It's frustrating when people assume their privilege comes from hard work instead of circumstance. It reveals a lot about how we perceive success and struggle.
I don't think there's a good way to communicate to a teenager that this shit is serious. I mean, developmentally, 17-year-old me was not really equipped to make that decision. You're hearing all this hype about the coolest, most prestigious schools. You're getting piles of marketing materials about fancy rec centers and cool dorms and scenic campuses, and you've never actually borrowed money in your life. I was so pissed when my parents put their foot down and told me I was going to stay at you instead of my expensive private dream school. But in retrospect, it was a really good decision.
I get that. At 17, it's hard to see the big picture. It feels like everyone is pushing you to choose the best option, but sometimes the pressure can cloud your judgment. I had a similar moment with my friends. We all wanted to go to top-tier colleges, but one of us ended up at a state school. It turned out fine for him. Just shows how things can work out in unexpected ways.
I've also seen so many people who have no idea what they want to do just go to college anyway because they think it's just naturally the next step after high school and spend $80,000 just treading water for a few years before they figure out what they actually want to do. I really think there should be a professional year between high school and college where students take low-paying jobs somewhere to earn an income, gain work experience, and then can spend time shadowing various professionals and industries. Some kids with smart enough parents do this during high school, but even then you're asking a 16-year-old what they think they should be doing when they're 21 while balancing everything else in their lives. Just a few months completely dedicated to gaining work experience and learning about professional pathways would go a long way.
I get what you're saying. A lot of people just jump into college without knowing what they really want. I had a friend who did that. He ended up switching majors twice and still didn't graduate on time. A year off to work or explore could have helped him figure it out. It's tough to ask teenagers to have it all figured out while dealing with high school stress too. A professional year sounds smart.
It wasn't until after a few years of college that I realized how much of a waste of money it is. I feel like it was just something that you had to do. I felt like I had to go to college or else be a failure. And if I went to community college, no one would take it seriously and I would never get a good job. I feel like everybody convinced me of this. and I never heard anybody say that it was a waste of money. I guess they tend not to tell the high school students about how they are about to be in debt because of their student loans for the majority of their lives.
Yeah, I get that. A lot of people go through school thinking it's the only path. I had a friend who did the same. He chased the degrees and ended up in so much debt. It took him years to find a job that paid enough to make a dent in it. It's like society puts so much pressure on you to follow that route, but nobody talks about the reality of it. Just feels off.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.